Good morning. This is Hap May with a Legal Play.
And I'm Chelsea El-Azzi, Hap's associate. So today we are talking about what I call condemnation.
Right. The power of eminent domain.
Yes.
Where a government can take property, which has been a long issue in American history.
But before we go there, I do want to say this topic came up when I was talking with one of our she does our website. She's not an attorney, and I said, we should do a topic on condemnation, and she was like, what, like rundown buildings, that are condemned? And I was like, well actually, condemnation has a lot of meanings, and sure,
it does. And we talk about that's one form when it could condemn a government condemns something because it's a dangerous thing,
right?
And that's one thing. And then another thing is when the government needs a particular piece of property to improve a road, to have flood control, to do some sort of infrastructure work, to build a school, or something that is a public use. That's another form of condemnation.
But it's most people, I think, would understand it as eminent domain in those terms.
Eminent domain, which is the power of the government. It's eminent domain. That the government has a domain over everything. Is a power that the government has to take property. In the United States, the Constitution and in most states require fair compensation to be paid to the landowner.
So this is the takings clause out of the Constitution.
Yes.
Yes. Where the government cannot take property without just compensation.
Right.
And there's a couple other hurdles, right, including, it needs to be for public use.
It needs to be for public use. There was a series of court cases that culminated about 15, 20 years ago with the Supreme Court allowing that public use to be broad, where the public use could be the fact that an area was condemned for the purposes of then selling it to a private developer who's going to do a mall or some other use that was good for the public to have in the process.
It probably depends on who you ask.
There were some cases in Hawaii where there was a condemnation done so property could be sold to people who had small houses. So a big plantation was eminent domain was used so that the smaller middle class or lower middle class people could have house lots in areas in Hawaii where there wasn't land that you could put houses on because the big plantation owners owned all of it, and so those were public uses. In response to the broad broad definition of public use, the Supreme Court came up with several years ago. Many states, including Texas, then passed constitutional provisions making it restrictive, so that there are only limited things you could do for public use. And basically, I think although case law may in the future may differ with this, but I think basically the idea of condemning property for a public use, where the public use involves in the sale to private landowners, is probably not something that can be done or can be done easily in the state of Texas.
A lot of what we've seen with our clients, though, is condemnation. It's not the property falling into disrepair and needing to be torn down. It's that maybe a road is being built.
Roads, flood control, very common in Harrison and surrounding counties.
Expanding an easement, potentially.
Expanding an easement or new road. I mean, there are new schools being built, and sometimes there's some condemnation work that needs to be done or a school expanding its area. So
if that's happening and your property is affected, then the government owes you just compensation. Right, and that's where lawyers and appraisers and all the professionals come in and get involved in the process. Okay, so my misunderstanding was kind of gleaned just from a lot of the cases that have come through this office, where I know that there are hearings and there are disputes that go on about, well, the government's offering me this much, and no, I think it's worth more than that, and there are ongoing hearings while I know that the property is now in government use, like the project has gone forward and the parties are still debating the land value.
Right.
So discuss with me the different processes there.
All right. The first threshold issues is the land and question required for public use. Now, usually, particularly in Texas, the government agencies are serious about it, and they want to take the land because they need it to widen a road, they need it for school, they need it for flood control district. There is some legitimate public use for it. There can be cases where there's a question as to whether or not there is a public use for it. I mean, there are examples where local governments have, been, abusive or corrupt, and, taken land that they, or tried to take land that they didn't need because they had some political issue within the division.
Feel like that one might be tough to prove, and that there'd be a lot of hours and time and money spent trying to.
There is, but there are some, some corrupt local politicians that probably use the power of condemnation for something more than just the good of the public and public use. So there are those issues. Also, there's an issue. So we're going to widen the road, and we're going to take 6 inches of my frontage. Is that really necessary? Is there not something else that could be done? Those are the kind of issues that is there a need? Is there a legitimate public use? Okay. Usually that the landowner loses that because the government really does need it. Safety, to have widen the road and make it safer is a public use. Flood control is a big issue. That's a legitimate public use.
So what we're getting at though is that the landowner can waive that argument.
And that's the second point. Once you get past that point, then all we're doing is talking about money.
How much is it really worth?
How much is it really worth? And how much does it? Not only how much is the area that they're taking worth, but how much does it reduce the value of the remaining land? So if I take a 6-inch slice out of my front yard, maybe that's not a big deal. If I take a 20-foot slice out of my front yard, well, now suddenly I don't have a front yard anymore, and so the rest of my house is not worth that much. And you have those kind of discussions in the process. And there's sometimes the government, even though they only need 20 feet, they may have to take an entire lot because it does so much damage to the rest of the lot that it renders the rest of the lot useless, so they have to buy the entire lot in the process.
Okay. And so once me getting back to my understanding of how there will still be discussions and hearings and battles going on about the value of the land, while the government somehow is already building the project is underway, the government's already using that land. Okay. How do you get there if the value hasn't been determined?
Right. Once we get past the issue that we're not going to challenge the public necessity of the project, we're just talking about money, then there is a process by which a special commissioners group is put together, and there is a price that they determine that they will pay
initially. Initial price.
Let's say they do $5 a square foot for the land that they are going to take.
Okay.
Now you say it's worth $8. I've got an appraiser that's going to testify that it's worth $8. So I'm going to take you to court, which is a process. You got a special commissioners, and then you can actually file a suit in district court for the district in which or the county in which the land is located, and a court will ultimately determine, what the value is. And you can go through the court, you can go through the appellate court, all the way up to Texas Supreme Court if you need be. But the process is first the special commissioners set a price, and then you can enter into an agreement where it says, I am going to allow the state to use that property. They will give me the $5 number that the commissioners came up with, $5 a foot, and then we will go litigate in district court whether my $8 number is right or your $5 number right or some other number is the ultimate outcome of this.
So you may get more, like the government may go ahead and use the land and start the project.
That happens a lot of times. I will give up a record. You can start doing surveys, start tearing down fences, actually building a road if that's what you're going to build in the process. And in the meantime, I've gotten my $5. We're now going to court. I'm going to say it's $8. Usually what happens after that is there's a settlement, and you wind up getting something a little more than the $5 that they gave you to start with to settle the case. Sometimes, they're too far apart and they actually do litigate the case. Usually it winds up, the verdict would wind up that the landowner gets a little more than they offered. You do run the risk as a landowner of getting less. So if in my example they gave us $5 a foot, we went through litigation, and the ultimate result of litigation was only worth $4 a foot. Well, they're going to look for that dollar back in the process. And maybe if it's not a big number, you can get them to agree to waive. If you waive the right to appeal, they may agree to it. So there's a number of things that could be done in the process.
Okay, sounds like you've done enough of these to kind of know.
Well, I've done enough of them, and I've been involved, both from the tax aspect and landowner aspect, and what the sort of the tax consequences of this are. Which I'll go into briefly. It is a special type of taking. You're allowed to replace the property, 1033 exchange, where you're allowed to take up to 3 years to replace the property. And when you do so, that's a tax-free transaction. Your old no gain or loss on the sale. The old basis goes into the new property.
Right, I hadn't thought of that, because if you're receiving money from the government, whether or not you wanted it to happen, it's still like a sale. You're still.
No, it is a sale. It is a sale. I mean, that's basically, and basically, I take Grandpa's ranch that Grandpa paid $50,000 for 60 years ago. Is now, worth millions of dollars, and the state's going to put a road through it, and they're going to pay Grandpa, $3 million.
And even though you didn't really want that $3 million, or you didn't want that road, you still have to.
That $3 million, that $3 million would be income if Grandpa doesn't, reinvest that property into some sort of real property. Now, it's unlike a 1031 exchange where you have to have intermediaries and escrow accounts and not touch the money and stuff like that. You can get the money, and you can spend the money. You just have to replace the property within the 3-year period.
Okay.
So that's
interesting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different issues that pop up with this. I mean, sometimes access. Once you take the front, can I get access to the property, or is there some other way that I can get access?
Right.
And if not, does that impact the damages I have on the property? Does it make the rest of the property worthless, or do we have to have and curb cuts, particularly when you get into smaller sections in sort of residential or densely populated areas? I mean, curb cuts. Even though I've got this nice little frontage road here, I can't get a curb cut. I mean, I had one before.
What's a curb cut? This is a new term
okay,
for me.
all right. If you go down a street,
you
will see that there are driveways, access points into that and stuff like that. Well, the government regulates where you can get a curb cut.
They do. You are correct.
Like
yes. If you're adding a handicap access in the front of your property, you do have to have a permit that allows for that. I've seen that in my neighborhood.
Where your driveway comes, a commercial driveways come like that. So if you have a piece of land that's had this nice little country road that you've been able to back out of a driveway or have access to your parking lot, for years, and all of a sudden they come widen that and make it a 4-lane road, and suddenly tell you, okay, but you can't have your driveway here anymore. You
can't keep me from parking on my property.
Well, that's something that needs to get negotiated in the process. And I mean, residential properties are one thing, but commercial properties, that's very important.
Yes.
I mean, if you have a gas station, and a lot of times gas stations love it because I get a road, I got more people coming back and forth, and I got more stuff like that. But they can't get to my station because I'm now at a corner, and I got this, and they gotta go 100 feet past my gas station and then come back on a
as a traveler myself that's been taking, the interstate while they've been doing construction on some exit roads, I have often wondered about those gas stations dealing with that problem where we're like, well, we would have stopped there, but we can't. We'd have to go all the way back around, and lots of things to consider.
That is, which are all issues that have effects on condemnation.
Okay.
And landowners' rights and economics.
All right. Well, that's eminent domain and condemnation in a nutshell.
Yes.
So.
Well, this is Hap May with Legal Play.
Thanks, Hap.